Well, I'm excited this week to have Jenny Thomasson on the Flower Podcast. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to sit down and chat with you.
Well, I just in learning more about you and your new book that's coming out here sometime in the fall. There was just so many exciting things that I thought this would be a great opportunity to kind of learn about your world, learn about what you do, and to hear your story. And so I'm really excited about this. I always like to start off our episodes by kind of in some way getting a condensed version of sort of how you grew into the flower industry.
Yeah, I love to hear everyone's stories too. So thank you. I was in college for graphic design and I needed a part time job. And I fell into a flower shop and knew almost instantly. It's kind of like when you meet the love of your life, I feel like,
Hmm.
because I really did. I met the love of my life. And I had absolutely no formal training, but I knew this was my absolute thing. And I did my schooling, but I always worked in the flower shop. So for 2 years, I worked underneath other people and finished my graphic design. And then I never left. I never went into an office building. I always stayed behind the desk with clippers and knives and walking on the rose petals and the thorns and the sun. I just loved it so much. And I worked underneath people for a few years, and then I opened up my own back in 2000 and yeah, I know 2004. I opened it up from the ground up, nothing, and just
Wow.
I'm gonna do it. And my daughter was 10 months old, just walking when I cut the ribbon, and built this beautiful flower shop in St. Louis. And I realized a few years ago that I wasn't always going to be my flower shop. So I had to kind of step out and I bought the domain name for Jenny T Floristry and just started branding myself as an artist. Because my daughter, you met her earlier,
Yeah.
she's almost 17. And I
Wow.
always said that when she goes off to college, all bets are off. So I started this other brand, my brand, me as an artist. And I learned so much opening a business and growing a business that I thought I'll be able to do this again, but do it for me and my vision. And I've been able to grow Jenny T Floristry, and I'm a part of the Telflor Education Specialist team.
Oh.
And I travel around and I do speaking and teachings independently. I do that as well, and I do stage presentations, and I really just am so inspired when I get to go and teach people and share my love of the craft. So that's really condensed.
Yeah, really condensed. So the name of your business that you started yourself from the ground up was what?
Stems.
Okay, so do you still have stems or is
Stems is still in the family, yes.
okay, okay. And so are you what city is that located in?
St. Louis,
St.
Missouri.
Louis. Okay. So does that mean, I mean, you're still in the St. Louis then, obviously.
I'm in St. Louis half the time. I do about half St. Louis and half Dallas right now. I'm teaching workshops at a shop in Dallas, one of the premier flower shops in Dallas, and also work with them internally with the company for merchandising and gift buying as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you're never bored.
I am never bored. I can't get enough of it. Of
That's exciting.
everything that has to do with the industry, I literally just keep soaking it up. So yeah, I'm always
Wow.
in it.
So I can't wait to get into this new phase of Jenny T Floristry, but I wanted to, that evolution of learning sort of from the ground up, behind the scenes, and then starting your own business. Is Stems a traditional flower shop, or was it more weddings and events? I'm just kind of wanting to get your background more on like
Sure.
what kind of business it was.
Stems started as a brick and mortar retail flower shop in 1,500 square feet.
Wow.
And yes, and I said from the very beginning, I don't want to do weddings. I, I just, you're laughing because you know what happens.
Well,
they,
I hear that so many times from flower shops. I mean, if I had $1 for every time a flower shop, I'd always ask because I would sell them flowers, and I was always curious. I'm like, don't you do weddings or events or anything? Oh no, who wants to do that? Well, that doesn't. Well, go ahead.
Exactly. I said I didn't want to do weddings. I just want to stand in my flower shop and play with my plants and raise my daughter. That was my goal. That's why I did it. I wanted to be in her life as she was young and coming up into school. And it was great. I got to raise her in the flower shop. But within the first year, somebody, would you do a wedding for me? And I thought, I guess so. I mean, I don't have anything else going on this weekend. And that completely took the business a direction I never even envisioned. 5 years after Stems opened their doors, we moved to 3,000 square feet because we had run out of room. But we always stayed in the same neighborhood that we started. And then 10 years in, so another 5 years in, we moved again. And right now we are occupying a building that I purchased, and it's over 6,000 square feet.
Wow.
And we are one of the premier wedding and special event florists in St. Louis. But we're
So
still brick and mortar.
yeah.
Still.
Congratulations. That's an accomplishment. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that, they're starting out and it's kind of like, can we do this and can we make this happen? And especially now, how has the business evolved? And I didn't want to get into this too much, but of course, with the pandemic going on, how have you had to morph through that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel everyone's affected, good, bad, or otherwise.
Sure.
The as my colleagues across the country know, and the world really, the events have just stopped. There's been a break on them. So they're being rescheduled, and there's a lot of paperwork, and there's a lot of consulting with them and reassuring with them. But the other side of the business, the everyday business, the funeral business, has grown. We're still
Wow.
selling weddings, which is wonderful, selling them for next year. And we require a deposit when we do sell a wedding. So there is a little bit of revenue coming in from that. So we're just taking appointments and we're booking those. But it's morphed into more of an everyday and the funeral. Some people are closing, I've noticed. Some flower shops are closing because they either can't or don't want to weather the storm. Some people that are a little bit older that probably were only a few years away from retirement anyway, you know? So we're seeing some of that too. Some corporate people are calling, some hospitals are calling. I think they've lost their contact for their flower shop. So we're just helping everyone we can along the way, and we'll see what happens on the other side.
I understand. Well, and I'm glad to hear that the everyday there at least trickles in, or there's still something going on, because that's one of the things I always feel like is a good indicator of how we're going to bounce back afterwards. If people still feel good about accepting a no contact delivery or a curbside pickup or something, and so good. That's encouraging. I appreciate that. And so out of this, you got an itch to reinvent yourself, which I think is really cool, and then create Jenny T Floristry. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So Jenny T Floristry began a few years ago. I bought the domain name, and I didn't even really know what I was going to do with it, but I knew I wanted it in my back pocket. So anybody who's listening out there, you should go and search your own name and see if it's available. And if it is available, buy it, because you never know what's going to happen, right?
Never.
Never know. So I became a member of the Telephone Education Specialist team a little over 5 years ago. And Jenny T Floristry, I thought, if I'm already doing this by myself, I'm out there teaching. And I never thought that I would be doing that separate from STEMs. And I thought, well, if that's there, I'm not out there speaking about STEMs, I'm out there thinking about me. So that was the beginning of it that I never even would have planned. It just happened after I did my first stage presentation for AIFD. The next year they approached me and asked me. Absolutely. So that took this whole other life of its own. And then people were reaching out to me independent, whether it was garden clubs or even flower shops I go to if they want me to come in and do a weekend with them or their staff. And then from there grew, I just wanted to put on a workshop myself. and see how that might happen. So I did my very first workshop at my flower shop in St. Louis. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to do an integrations workshop. I want to integrate all these people from all over the states. And I want them to come here and let's spend 3 days and just dive really deep into what contemporary floristry could be. And that was my very first kind of pull up my bootstraps since I opened my retail flower shop doors. That was my first, like, is it going to work? It might work. So, and it worked. And then I said, well, I want to do another workshop. Where do I want to go now? Somewhere warm. I want to go to Arizona. And I said, I'm going to Arizona. And I like put a little pin down, you know, like they do on the maps. Like, I want to go there. And I pulled everything together and that happened too. And then now in Dallas, that's happening. So it's been such a remarkable journey. I can't even fathom what I would have thought if you told me this when I started my retail flower shop. Like, this is the path that floristry is going to take you. I would have told you were crazy. It's been a remarkable ride. So looking into the future for Jenny T Floristry, I want to continue doing what I've been doing. I want to continue putting on workshops and doing lectures and inspiring people. And then I get to talk about my book and then book number 2 and, you know, just keep going.
That's so exciting. And you just in the last few minutes, you've said so many things. I now have so many questions I want to ask. And so that's really unfair, actually, because now I feel pressure. So first of all, you are an I always get this mixed up, AIFD member. And that's an incredible accomplishment on its own. And how long have you been a member of AIFD?
I have been a member since 2012. I did my
Wow.
first presentation on the AIFD national stage in 2015. It was called A Road Less Traveled, and I did a whole stage presentation on plants, but
Really?
contemporary installation style plant sculpture. And that was amazing. It was the first presentation I've ever done in my life. I know.
I mean, you had to. Okay, so I'm getting feedback. So you had to be. I mean, that's a huge honor to be on the national stage, and you were only in. Well, I can't do the math all of a sudden in my head. Like a year or two.
2015. I was only in for 2 full years before I went on stage.
That's incredible.
I said I'm gonna put in for it. I'm gonna fill out the form and I'm just gonna pitch my idea. And wouldn't that be cool if I got it? And I remember the night that I pitched the idea, I literally didn't have a piece of paper. I went into my kitchen and all I could find was a brown paper bag, like you put your sandwich in. And so I opened it up, I like cut it up one side and opened it like a piece of paper. And I did the whole presentation. I still have it in my workbook. I did the whole presentation sketched on that brown paper bag, and it came together in like less than an hour, 45 minutes maybe. I know.
That's a gift.
And I stayed pretty true to it. But yeah, I kept it. I still have the brown paper bag.
Wow, that's a gift. And so I guess it was received really well because that wasn't your only time, right? Have you been on again, or you were supposed to be on?
I was on in 2017, and I did yet another modern sculpture inspiration session, and it was called Living Sculptures. So again, I was incorporating plants. This time I added some flowers to it. And then I was supposed to be on stage this month for a symposium that unfortunately didn't happen, as we know, but I will be on stage next year. So my presentation is also from an element of the plant that we use. I'm always drawn back to plants, but my whole stage presentation is all about roots.
Oh, how neat. Yeah, and I think it's so cool because, I mean, obviously plants are such a hot trend right now, and I hate to call it a trend because they've been around forever, obviously, but as far as house plants go and us bringing them back inside, I feel like things have become, people are so interested in that, and being able to incorporate that into design or compositions is sort of a home run situation. That's really incredible. What is it about plants that really intrigues you?
I think it's because there's everything there in that plant. It's like everything that we have with us. It's just really a representation to me of the whole life cycle. We've got the roots, we've got the part underneath that's growing that nobody can really see. Then we have this beautiful part that we see that shows to the world. And then every once in a while, we get this beautiful little thing that we like to call flower. So it's just, I'm just enamored by it. And I can't stop. My daughter came to my apartment last week and she looked around. She's like, Mom, you're getting to be a plant mom. I just can't stop. But um, I just think it represents to me every aspect of what I feel. I really feel it. I can sit there and I can feel what's there. I get in nature and sometimes I'm so moved I cry.
Hmm.
Just it touches me very, very deeply. And to be able to design with something that is a living piece. I love flowers, don't get me wrong. But I think it's just magical. Like that is living right there. I can take that out of this beautiful design and I can like grow that. Like that's magic to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's a pretty cool view of it, and I know that influences a lot of areas of your design spirit, if you will. And you said something else that I think is interesting, that there's so many different nuances in the area of design, but you referred to it as contemporary design, and I feel like I know what that is, and I feel like some people might think they know what that is, but in your opinion, what is contemporary design?
Oh, that's such a great question. Oh man. And I really want to give you a beautiful answer. And I agree with you. I agree when you say that some people might think they know what that is. And I think that's fair to say. I
Well,
think
I
my
think
is
I
to
think
me.
sometimes, let me jump in. They think sometimes people, I can put an anthurium in an arrangement, or I can use a tillandsia or an air plant in an arrangement, and that makes it contemporary. And I'm like, yeah, not maybe not, and that's why
Yeah.
I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, if I'm gonna sell something to someone, and so I have to think about how I would paint my words to express my feeling, especially for something that's so visual, like our medium. If I were to sell someone a contemporary style design, it would be something that is more like sculpture. That's
Mm.
the easiest way that I can tell someone that may not know what that is how to get their mind there. Because I do feel that it is it is really like the clean lines and the minimalist sometimes,
Mm.
or it's the one material like for an installation where it's one thing. A brown paper bag crumpled may not be anything, but if you crumple 10,000 brown paper bags and put them in a design somewhere, then it becomes something, then it becomes contemporary. It's a different forward thinking than what we're used to. Yeah, I would say sculpture. That's going to be my best representation for someone that may not know.
And I think it's a good way to kind of think about it, to wrap our brains around it as we move forward in this conversation, because you've got, people have like different garden designs, and there's a lot of things that people might think are beautiful or are artistic, or but there is a line you cross, and of course I think of Hitomi Gilliam, and I think of some of the things I've seen her do, and some of the things I've seen in your work, actually, and there is definitely a structural, sculptural kind of component to it, and it also embraces not just flowers but other natural elements, which I think are important as well in trying to convey, whatever this emotion is that you want to get out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that being that you are a member of AIFD and as an organization, I feel like they embrace this concept of contemporary floral design on levels that people that aren't familiar with the organization may not really know. I'm excited to kind of see more of that because I feel like it elevates our industry as a whole. Because then all of a sudden you're adding value or you find new ways to add value. Were you able to do any of that, use those techniques or those ideas through just like an everyday shop situation, or is it something that is, a lot of times people feel like, well, this is in this camp and then this is in the other camp, and if I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times where someone says, well, my customers won't buy that, but yet I feel like there is a way to cross over.
Yeah, I used to do it all the time. I used to do it every single day. Some days I would be awarded 5 minutes of free time, and some days I would be awarded hours of free time. It just depended on the workload.
Well, sure.
But I would do it all the time. I would do it in displays in the showroom. I would do it in cooler designs. Not to say it was in everything, but it was a release for me for what I really was drawn to, that I got to show my customers and put that out there. And then when you say that people say my customers would never buy that, I too have heard that so much in traveling and speaking, but I always tell people, you don't know unless you try. And once you try, you will be amazed. Because I have one specific customer still comes in, and you might say she doesn't look like she would enjoy contemporary design, but she every holiday will come in and we do 5-6 pieces for her house, only wants contemporary design, and her home is not contemporary, but she enjoys, I think, the fleeting art that is floristry, the perishable elements of it. She enjoys that contemporary design in her home for that moment. Not to say the whole place is going to be that way, but she does appreciate it. So I would do it all the time, little by little by little by little.
Well, and you may have customers who walk in and because they see that piece, they keep coming back. Because I know we used to get phone calls all the time. As a wholesaler, people will call in and say, I'm trying to do something. I realize you guys don't do this. Who's somebody you can recommend that does something different? And there's always a handful of people, and we'd ask a couple more questions to kind of know whether we direct this way or that way. But we would get those questions. And so there's obviously a market for it. But I think you kind of hit the nail on the head in a major way that for that person whose home doesn't reflect that style, it's okay because this is fleeting. This is a temporary thing that they can enjoy in the moments that it's still with us. And it doesn't have to reflect, the permanence of a home or the furniture or the, decor or whatever. So that's pretty cool.
You just gave me goosebumps.
Oh, well, good. That's a good sign. That's a good sign. Well, I just think there's so many times I've heard those things said, and I want to encourage people to step outside of that traditional box. And I think, is it hard for you? And I so want to get to your book, especially now, but I got to ask this question. Is it hard for you being a teacher for a wire service to, like an educator for them, to incorporate these ideas? Because a lot of times, they are after a certain look or a certain longevity, or they have certain standards.
They do, yes, they have certain standards. But I will say that the wonderful thing about being part of a Telflora team is they don't put us all in a box.
Oh.
They really love that each one of their educators brings something different to the table. And I'm so glad I fell into that group of individuals because I've been able to use the platform that they've given me, but I've been able to put my spin on everything. And that's really, it hasn't been restricting at all. If anything, it's been liberating because I have all that support behind me.
Mm.
So.
No, that's awesome. And that makes every educator, want to have students. You know, they come out, oh, here comes Jenny, let's go see her class. We know it's different from the last one. We want to make sure we learn from her what she has to offer. What's your favorite thing about teaching?
Oh, I love to inspire people. That's my favorite. I I love that after I do a presentation or I do a Zoom or I do a workshop or whatever, I love to talk to people. I get inspired by them,
Hmm.
and the fact that I see their joy, it like exudes, and they're like, I could do this. This was amazing. Thank you so much. And then top it all off, if they send me a note or they send me a picture of what they learned from me and says, look what I did. Oh my, that's that's worth all the tea in China, right?
Yeah, that's incredible. That's really great. Well, I that's exciting because I mean that's, you know, you've accomplished something if you can empower somebody.
And just to touch them, like light that little fire, like feed that little flame. Some people have lost it,
Mm.
and they just, oh, what else am I going to learn? Like, I've learned everything. I've heard that so much being on the road. And I'm like, it's there though. We all have this ability to be creatives, and just to kind of push it just a little bit more, it makes it all so worth it.
Mm.
And to collaborate with my friends, and we learn from each other, but inspire each other. That's what it's about.
So, do you feel the need, or do you like continue your education?
Yeah. Every year I go and study with someone. And this year I was supposed to be in Scotland. I was going to study with Yoni. And of course, we know
Right.
what happens. But I've been to Germany a couple of times to study with Gregor. I've been to San Francisco a couple of times through a lady that puts on some smaller workshops, and she brings in some really unusual people. I've done that a couple of times. I go to every lecture that I can that's around me. I go to symposium not only to be a part of the educators, but also to attend the symposium. When I presented at my first symposium, I had everything timelined in such a way that we didn't miss a single lecture. And I
Mm.
think that's really, really important. I want to give back to myself. I have to show up for myself if I'm going to have anything to give to other people. So I
Mm.
have to be.
That's an interesting dynamic. I don't know that I've ever had a guess. I'm trying to think back now. I have had many that have a value that need to just continually um, learn, never stop learning. But the way you just put it, of having that opportunity to give, to pour into yourself, so that way you can give to other people. Um, I think that's really important. And I too, you touched on this, and there's so many times when I've worked with shops or businesses that have been in business for a really long time, and it makes me sad sometimes when I hear, like, well, why do I need to do this? I've been doing it for 20 years, or I've been doing it for 10 or 15, well, however long. That what is what could I possibly learn, is what they're saying. And that makes me sad
Yeah, I
because
agree. I think we owe it to each other in this industry to constantly be helping the bar to get
mm,
raised. When I teach people, I don't teach to the level that we are in the industry. I teach up. And we'll talk about these other things, but I'd rather teach you here so you can go here
mm,
than teach you here so you can get to here. I want to start here. We owe it to each other, I
mm,
think. So I love to see when I go and I do teaching engagements or speaking engagements, I love to look out and I say, who's had a shop more than 20 years? Who's had a shop more than 30, 40, 50? I get to the last person, because I want everyone to see and recognize that person, because that's
mm.
amazing. If they've had a shop for 50, 60 years and they're still in that audience, to your point, like,
Yeah, they
that's
get it.
They get it. That's what we need.
Yeah.
We need those people to be glorified and really put on a pedestal that they're still pushing. They understand it. It's important.
Well, I love the title of your book, and Perishable Poetics.
Yeah.
And I know when we talked for the very first time, I don't know if it was last week or when, but um, it it was intriguing because I'm like, I love the idea that there's this perishability of what we do, and there's an intrinsic value because of that. The clock is ticking, let's embrace it. But then you add this idea of poetry or poetic, your poetic license to it, and I just really and then your subtitle, I'm going to read this. So, manifesting emotion through contemporary floral design. So, perhaps now, if you just are now tuning in, you understand why I asked the question earlier about contemporary design, because I it's an important aspect of kind of unpacking this huge topic, which is your book. So, what do you mind just diving in and sort of embracing this brainchild of yours that you came up with, and how it's so much a part of yourself?
Yes. Thank you again so much for asking and bringing this up and wanting to talk about it. Um, this is something that I've always been connected to. I've always been connected to creating. Poetry is something that I've always done. I've enjoyed the written word very much, and then found my thing that is floristry. And I wanted to write a book, and so I thought, I'm just going to do all of it. I'm going to put all of my loves together in a project. And I showed up in a positive way every time I did it. And I think it shows at the end. I wanted to just bare my soul and let people know kind of how I feel about things. Sometimes it's a little quirky. Sometimes, as my grandma put it when she read it, it's a little deep. Sometimes it's just real. We all feel it, So there's all of these different levels, and it's broken up into 3 segments. There's one segment called you, there's one segment called me, and there's one segment called us.
Hmm.
And it was created in a point in my life um, that a lot of stuff changed. So there's a lot in that book, from being a mom and being a wife and then not being a wife, and going through separation and divorce and love and sadness and happy, and it all happened at that time. So there's a whole nother level if you read into it that you can kind of see. And then the floral that coincides with that, um, I was really trying to express my feeling when I was creating these things in a very authentic way. And hopefully, the person enjoying the book is going to be able to read the poetry, see the design, and kind of bridge the gap and be able to understand like where it was drawn, the inspiration came from.
Hmm. And so, do you mind if we go a tad bit deeper with these 3 categories? Because I think you covered the me pretty well, but why you? Not you, but when you.
Yeah, yeah. But why you?
Uh huh.
Um, because I wanted to show that a there was a relationship between the you and the me that became the us. I couldn't
Mm.
just talk about me and us. I had to break it all down. And people can see that if they read into it. They can see there's sometimes it's a little bit sadness because I'm talking about a different you. And
Mm.
sometimes it's a little bit happy because I'm talking about a different you. And then sometimes maybe it's a little uh, exciting because I'm talking about a different you. And the me is just raw. But the us, same thing. It's not exactly about one specific person all the time. I'm in
Mm.
there, but the relationships that we have in our lives with different people, they're always kind of coming through.
Hmm.
So, like I said, some are happy, some are sad, some are love, some are a full range of emotion. You're not going to get me to cry. I'm not going to cry.
I'm not trying to, I promise. Um,
I just needed the you to be there. We all
sure,
have yous. Yeah.
sure. No, and I think that's well said, and I appreciate you saying those things because it's a lot of times, it's so funny. I remember being in college and reading poetry or having some literature course, and they're always talking about, like you read this piece and you're supposed to like tear it apart and dig deep into these things. And I'm always sitting there thinking, did they really think that when they wrote this, or were they just like, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, it's just a story. It's just a verse. It's just a moment. And of course, as I got older, and I won't say wiser, but as I got older, I have done certain things too creatively, and it's been, yeah, I was pretty deliberate about it, and it's like, it's kind of cool to know that, yeah, you could probably enjoy a beautiful book and read the poetry on the surface, but if you take the time to actually go deeper into it, it actually adds a depth that I think is really powerful, and I appreciate you doing that. And that has to be incredibly vulnerable, and it's you're putting yourself on paper, and then we'll see how it gets accepted, and that's got to be nerve wracking. How the process of writing a book? How did you begin this journey with the book?
Oh my goodness. It was kind of like sketches on a brown paper bag. It's kind of still, I mean, it was still the same thing. I just come up with an idea, and same with my compositions. I have notebooks upon notebooks upon notebooks that are sketches and ideas written down that are gotten and taped and stapled, and I just keep all of this stuff. And it was a day that I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a book. And I just had the inspiration and sat down and went through my notebook and sketched it all out, and then I presented it to the publisher, and they looked it over and we talked about it, and they said absolutely, but we don't want to just do one, we want it to be three. And I was like,
Oh my
okay,
gosh.
I'll do three. So I signed up for the three, and then the process from there, then the ball starts rolling. It took about 18 months. So it's a very long process. um, I did everything with perishables, and I did it all in one fell swoop. I had my sketches, I knew what I was doing, but my photographer and I, in 1 week, we shot every single day. And I have 45 compositions in book number one. And there's numerous pictures of each. And then we have the completed composition, and then we went through, and instead of taking pictures as we were building, I built everything and then we dissected it. And then she took pictures of the dissected portions of it. I have a little bit of a description on kind of how it was made, but that's not the goal of the book, right? The goal is to visually inspire, and then to read the poetry and feel the emotion, and then to share the sketches and the process of it all.
46 pieces is a ton of content. So this is maybe not a how-to book because you don't really get into all of that. But when you deconstruct things, that's pretty amazing. I mean, you're giving these bite-sized pieces that people can take away, and then the poetry. I mean, it's really an impressive task in 18 months, and to create all the imagery and designs in a week, that's crazy. So, um, yeah, I don't. You probably don't sleep, I'm guessing. So,
I I do my fair share of sleeping, yes, but I'm busy a lot.
wow, that's incredible. One of the things I wanted to chat about, there's a few more things actually, but specifically one thing is that I learned that you use the Details Flower software, one of our sponsors. And I'd love to get your feedback on that and working with it and why you work with it and what you like about it.
Sure. Yeah. So the flower shop, as we talked about, has really evolved into wedding special events. People are known for it. And I was using just a format that I came up with on how to send proposals, how to build my own recipes, how to be very professional in my consultation space, and kind of projecting that with our clients. Um, and that really was great. There was really nothing wrong with it. But then when we found out about details and we were like, oh my goodness, this is the next level. We talk about our
Mm.
next level for design, right? It's our next level for our profession, for us in STEMs. And the proposal was so beautiful when we saw it. We thought, oh my goodness, if there's a bride in our area and she's going around to 3, 5, 7 florists and she's going to be getting proposals back from them, how beautiful would ours look compared to maybe the format that I was using previously, which was just kind of written out. I'm being honest, and
Sure.
mine worked great for a while, but really it puts you heads above your competition. I mean, visually, again, visual world, they see that beautiful proposal page where it's got the inspiration photos, you have the color palette that you've talked about, you've got their name on the bottom, and that's just the first page. And then you get into like second page, third page, and it just keeps getting better. It's like a 5-course meal. I think if you're looking at it for the first time as a consumer and this is being proposed to you, of course they have their stuff together. You know what I mean? Of course, that flower shop, they listen to me. My colors are there. My inspiration photos are there. They've got everything itemized out. I mean, and it's all put together and wrapped with a nice little neat bow. And so we had to do it. It was really a no-brainer. And then on the other side of the industry, so now we go to AIFD's side of the industry, that this last year that we were going to be doing this month, when we put all of our procurement together. So to break that down a little bit, when you put on a presentation, you have to submit your material list, hard goods and fresh, to a procurement person that's in charge. Or in this case, we were putting our procurement list into details.
Mm.
And then the person that was in charge of procuring fresh and hard goods, they had access to the file. So then they could go through using the format in details when you build recipes. That's essentially what we were using. And it just made it so much easier for them. And they had never done that previously to this year. Yes,
Wow.
when I presented in 2015 and I, typed up my procurement list of everything I needed, I emailed that list to the procurement chair. They then, if you could imagine, had to take all those emails, make their own spreadsheet, dissect all of that, but by using details on that, other event end. I thought that was pretty remarkable. It has a lot of capacity to go from everywhere from the mom and pop retail flower shop all the way to the very, very high end production style floristry. So she did a great job.
Well, that's impressive. And the other components, like, well, let me ask this question because I had this question literally last week.
Mm-hmm.
Someone was asking me because they were considering getting it, and they had some questions, and I just referred them to, call Corrine and the team. And one of the questions that was sort of proposed was, how long does it take you from the time you sign up and you get it to really be fluid working with it? And not, I mean, there's always a learning curve, right, with software, but I
Yeah.
feel like you have to load information in. So
Yeah.
how did you feel about that, or what was that like?
Yeah, it is a process. I'll be honest with you, but I was building recipes anyway, freehand, long-handed, when I was doing my wedding proposals. I know some people don't do that. So the people that don't do that and they just say that bouquet looks like it's $400 and just, blankly price things, they might have a harder time getting into the habit of filling everything in and doing a recipe. But I wasn't so unused to that process. So I enjoyed putting the recipes in. I enjoyed taking the time and finding the imagery and all that stuff. But I can only equate it to the guy at the Apple store when I bought my first MacBook. I was like, what do I do with it? And he said, my homework for you is to just play with it. That's how you're going to learn how to use it. So it's kind of the same with details. You have to do it every day and just play with it and add things in and figure out how you can navigate quicker. And it takes time though.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But I think in the end you end up saving time, I would think, because once you get put that legwork in and you invest that time you're already spending, by the way, then you have the option to kind of, I don't know, duplicate that or, just sort of,
Just pull it up really quickly. You can say, I
yeah,
know I want to do this bouquet, but let's say this bride has an accent color of buttercream yellow instead of baby pink. So I'm going to pull up that bouquet and I'm going to just edit those other couple little things in there. But the majority of the work, the bulk of the work is done. We've already figured out our grocery list for meal prep this week. So we don't have to figure out the grocery list again, that kind of thing.
hmm. And do you use the contract feature or the templates that they have included in that as well?
We do not. We have our own contract that we've been using for a number of years that we've had somebody work with us on. And we know that legally everything with our state is right and it works for us.
Right.
So we use our own contract.
Sure. Well, I'm excited to hear about that and just wanted to kind of ask you because I knew, number one, that you used it, and it's exciting to be able to hear, people who are sold on it and that it brings value and some organization. And I don't know. I know that I've had customers that are recipe people and that are not recipe people. And I can't help but think that if you're not a recipe person, even though you may put that legwork in, that you're going to save money or you're going to make more money because maybe you're not pricing things accordingly as you should. And I don't know, I feel like it would help make money. And so,
Yeah, and I know that when I started in this industry, it's a huge learning curve, right? Huge learning curve. So you have to really be in it every day. And especially we're dealing with something that the price fluctuates, season, availability,
right.
what country it's coming from, did it have a plane ticket, all of this stuff. So when I was pricing things out, that was the only way that I knew. I needed to know that I was covering my cost of goods sold. And I tell people that all the time that if you don't focus on your cost of goods sold, you literally will close your doors. You just lock them up. Don't even come into work. Just stay at home. I mean, that's how you make money. And if you don't have your pulse on how the market is fluctuating, there's no way that you can control that. It gives you a little bit of an upper hand when wedding week comes. You know what you've allocated for those 5 stems or those 12 stems, or maybe you may not be able to get them, but you know what kind of money you're playing with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like too, the popularity of being sustainable, or sustainable floristry, and a lot of times that people refer to that as more from an environmental standpoint or an eco-friendly standpoint, but it's also in profitability, making sure you're paying you have the revenue to pay your bills. That's part of being sustainable, to keep doing what you love. And I think that's important. So thank you for sharing that. I was just curious and wanted to dive into that. With everything that you've done and you've kind of touched on it in different ways, not specifically, but just generally, I was just wondering, what maybe was one challenge that you've really had to kind of go through or deal with, from your business standpoint, that you learned something and that would help somebody else.
Mm. I learned in the beginning when I thought that it wasn't going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Numerous times I thought it wasn't going to work. Started from the ground up, had nothing, right? Numerous times I would say, how are we going to make this work? Like, there's less than $500 in the bank account. Like, we have to put food on the table. I have a little girl. Like, what? And I learned in the very beginning that you have to show up and you have to be positive and you have to give your very best to people that are wanting to support you. So I was always showing up, smile on my face, and what can I do to help you? I'm here to help you. What can I do to share with you? What can I do to teach you? I was always trying to give the best part of me to whoever was there that was saying, what can I do to support you? So just showing up every day, giving to yourself, smiling, and then giving back to the people that are there in your life. That doesn't go away, I think. I'll have that forever.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Um, just a follow-up question. Is that something that's natural for you, or is that something that depends on the day, is more challenging to do?
It is very natural for me to show up and be super positive. I'm a very positive person. I think some days I'm more of an introverted extrovert than I am an extroverted introvert. So some days I just want to give and give and give and give, and some days I'm like, today's for me. Today's for me. But I just putting that bright, smiley face on and just looking at things in an optimistic way, everything will work out. My grandma always told me that if it's meant to be, it's meant to be, and this too shall pass.
Mm.
So I'm just very positive. Are you a positive person?
I try to be. I'm probably 50-50. I'm probably one or the other, and usually when I'm around people, it's very easy for me to be positive, and so I look forward to that, and that's always great. I think that it's good to hear that there were days starting out that you wondered, is this going to work? Is this going to work? Because everybody goes through that, I think. And, unless you just won the lottery or something, I feel like everyone goes through that. But yet you feel like you're the only one at the time. And
The
like,
world is heavy.
yeah.
The world is heavy on some days where you really don't know if it's going to work. And the last man that I worked for, who I still am in touch with, such a wonderful man, third generation flower shop. I learned a load from him and his family. Before I left the shop to start my own shop, he said, if you make it 5 years, you'll make it.
Mm.
And he was always in the back of my mind. I would hear him like, come on, go to 5 years, go to 5 years, go to 5 years. So it was good for me to kind of have that goal there. But there were days I just was not sure, but it all worked out.
Yeah, sure did. And way bigger and way more ways than you ever imagined. And that's really exciting. So if I always love to end and ask my guests that piece of advice. And so I'd love to know, and of course you've shared a lot of great things along the way, but I didn't know if there was maybe, of course you just shared that piece of advice from somebody, but something that someone gave you or something that you just have learned along the way that you'd like to pass on to someone else.
Um, my bit of advice to any creative would be to take the time to create every single day. If it's 5 minutes, if it's an hour, if it's half the day, if it's all day, but give yourself the permission to just create unapologetically without caring if it's good. It might be horrible. It might be amazing, but I guarantee you'll learn something from it. I know I have.
Hmm. I've heard that said with writers that might have writer's block or creative, people that, you get into a routine. Oh, this, you get into that mental trench where you just can't get out. And it's the exercise of doing just exercise of creating. If you're a writer, which just didn't matter what you wrote, just write something, write a couple of pages of something. And I think that's so true. Do you think it's like a muscle that you have to exercise?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I forget who said it, but famous quote that you can't use up your creativity. The more you
Oh,
use it, the more you have. And I think it's so true. I mean, you're just opening your mind every single time and you're kind of building that toolbox, right? You're building your arsenal. Gregor asked me one time when I was there, because I've seen him so many times, and he came up to me and said, Jenny, why are you here? I remember this. And I said, what? I'm here to be at the workshop, Gregor. What are you talking about? And he was like, no, 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 no. Why are you here? And I was like, well, I'm building my arsenal. And he goes, arsenal? Arsenal? And I was like, yeah, like I'm building my weapons. I'm building my firepower. I'm building my support. And he goes, oh, I remember that still to this day. But yeah, it's kind of like that. You have to keep giving to yourself, like we talked about before. You have to keep showing up. You have to keep doing it, building this so you can give, whether
mm,
it's teaching or whether it's just people in your life so you can love them. So,
that's great.
hmm.
I love that. Thank you so much, Jenny, for being on the Flower Podcast.
Thank you. It was so fun.